Hey, what's going on?
Made it back, huh? And a quarter more than that's why. Do they all smell different?
Depending on who's in.
Oh, well, yeah, maybe that. I was just thinking about the room itself. Do they- A lot of places just think that they
Yeah, that's true.
depending on where I go to, yeah, what they're made of. Yeah. It's kind of odd the way that works.
Call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next is a consent agenda. Any questions or comments on that? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Is there anybody that'd like to speak to something that's not on the agenda tonight? Next, no special reports or presentations, so old business, Bower Building. Is there anybody that'd like to speak to this agenda item? All right, Corey?
Yeah, so kind of haven't talked about it really in a little while, but trying to get it up and active again here. I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a kind of brief history. It's kind of been a windy road to where we've gotten here. So obviously 2019 is when the Bower Building got donated. The previous council voted $100,000 for a brand new roof to mitigate the water damage, mold, etc. The Bower Committee was formed of residents, council members, rec director, to find use for the Bower Building and explore a funding mechanism. Overwhelming support for the building used as a community center was kind of revealed early on. Committee brought in an engineer to render possible design with input from the rec and other groups. Did 2 rounds of public outreach. The first got 170 responses, with 15.9% saying no to having a sales tax to fund the building. The second wave, 321 responses, 16.9% no, very kind of similar deals there. However, those 2 surveys, when they went out, involved specifically a sales tax, and they were also posed with the question, would you also consider a property tax to fund a community center? I went back through, there was 177 comments, a few nights ago I went back through, 177 comments from the second survey, the one that got the most exposure. Overwhelming themes, 2 overwhelming things about them were that 1, not the right time due to the pandemic. 2, did not want their taxes raised. The latter of which is off the table at this point for what's being proposed now. The other being the pandemic issue, most of it was tax on groceries, which if Laura Kelly has anything to say about it, that may not be an issue anyway there either. But the sales tax was definitely the overwhelming theme, with a little touch on the pandemic not being the right time, etc. The committee then presented the data to the school board. The rec was always the ideal partner here that we kind of envisioned occupying that. It became clear kind of well into it that we were just talking apples and oranges. The committee was always talking a community center. and the rec was always envisioning a much larger, operation that they could fund programming out of. They just couldn't program the community center the way they envisioned programming the rec center. And that was always kind of the difference there. And so, it went back and forth several months, and ultimately kind of started leaning toward Plan B once it was realized that the rec may not be the best fit to occupy and keep that building open for the public to use. The Plan B was always some sort of a way of using a city staff member to fill that role, to be in there to keep open gym hours, to keep the game room open, to have that sort of open at all times for everybody. And we started to move that direction, and then the Boys and Girls Club opportunity presented itself. The Boys and Girls Club, the committee met with some of their board members. They were very excited, especially at what they and we felt was a void for programming in that junior high to high school range. So we sent out the last survey that was mainly because it was focused on that junior high age group. Do you have a child that age? No. You're like me, you just got kicked out of the survey. You voted yes, then you got to answer if you would use that type of programming. Positive feedback there. We felt pretty good sending it back to them. However, they use a specific metric to judge how much funding they're going to be able to get for that program, and that metric is discounted school lunches, and Baldwin just didn't qualify. And so the number we were hoping for ended up being $125,000 annually to operate that program out of the Bauer Building. That's a no. Unfortunately, it's kind of a bummer because I felt that they, coupling with whoever else could operate out of that building, would have been a nice tandem. So then, in the meantime, been trying to rally up funding privately for the building while that's going on at the same time. We've kind of, I feel, hit, I don't want to necessarily say a ceiling because there's other opportunities out there. One, so far that's been raised, let's see, we have $245,000 raised privately without, and that's without hearing back from some individuals or businesses who haven't gotten back yet. Julie, you last time had the idea that we should have probably been doing earlier on, which is rallying for just individuals like myself. We can't write a $5,000 check. Maybe I could cough up 200. There's probably a lot of people out there, and that adds up big time. So I would definitely like to explore that and keep that number growing. I feel like that number can still grow, and whatever that number grows, however much you grow there, you take away from whatever has to eventually come out of the existing quality of life tax that opens up in 5 years. So this brings us back to the original Plan B of finding a way for the city to position, to staff that position there, to have open gym hours. I think the committee, I think the council's even expressed a lack of interest in it being a hand over the keys type operation where you go get a key like you do for maybe the golf course, and you can go inside and then you hand the key back in. I've always envisioned that open gym, that open room, that open engagement with consistency and with consistent hours. An obvious scenario would be to consolidate the management of the community center, Sullivan Square, golf course, clubhouse rental into that community center position, thereby capturing those revenues as well as saving the $5,000 annually that the city pays the rec to manage Sullivan Square. That would just be one position. That was kind of the first suggestion. We had presented that to the rec. Casey, you'd spoken to Matt and presented it to him about what that would look like. And it was requested by Matt that we get a operation agreement sent over to them for the rec board to consider. And that's what's in front of you right now, that we can kind of go over here. Obviously, what's highlighted in red is sort of the big differences. This is kind of basically a template from what Sullivan Square operation agreement is. So you can see you kind of got to start off pretty your starting point. Monday through Friday, open the facility from 7 to 9. That allows your morning walkers, your people who want to get in there and use the gym and facility and multi-purpose rooms early. And then that 4 to 6 that captures the after school. This I believe gets us in the door. This is, I think people are going to be asking for it to be open a lot longer, and we're gonna be finding ways to keep it open. They asked for a number of what the city would contribute, so this would be, I'm not really sure about where we stand on occupying the actual building, or this would just be operating the building as I understand it maybe, but this would still include free utilities, this includes free rent, and this includes what we're recommending here for the council to review is $25,000 a year for the employee's compensation. And that's a part-time employee, obviously, for 4 hours, Monday through Friday, daily. The funds generated from the community center, that's a big question that we just don't know the answer to. This position, I could see very easily eventually paying for itself. I think that people are gonna use the heck out of that thing. I think, up in my wife's hometown, they use their community center for weddings constantly. And that's just one type of an event, let alone all the others that we can imagine. We have Baker University right next door, and all kinds of others who might rent that out. So those are the two main deals on that operating agreement. The revised plans, we did go back to Jay. Like I said, the longer this conversation goes on, the more it evolves. Less so as we're kind of getting what I feel might be the end of it. But we currently have court over in the American Legion building, sometimes council events over there, and we have council in here. One of the things that we had tossed out early in that strategic planning session, I think it was one of the first ones, was the council chambers, having that consistent, you don't have to roll in and out type deal, a permanent location where the audio is always clear because it's always the same, the visual is always the same, and that that expandability to where we can have more people actually come in and attend. That was we bid that early on, and that was $250,000, and that was using a building that was already owned by the city. So, that's the number right there. Adding the dais, which is, I think by state statute, you have to have it for when you have court, which is, the fancy wood trimmed kind of stage there, and it has to be elevated. Adding that dais into that bottom multi-purpose room and kind of keeping it on that back wall, and then curtaining that wall off, and that way it's always a multi-purpose room for the days that you're not having it, and then bam, the curtains up and you're just ready to go at all times. That excites me, and I'm surprised we hadn't thought about it a little bit earlier. You can open that up to where you can expand the council out even into the gym floor. But you think about when you leave, so let's say we were to leave here, we are no longer constantly occupying this space for the council. You could do something more permanent in here if the library chose to do so. They're not bound to having this thing be temporary all the time. The same goes for the Legion building. That could now be used, that's a city-owned space that can be used more consistently for other purposes than having to roll in and out for court and council events. So that brings us back to the funding mechanism here. $245,000 raised through private funding. Still waiting to hear back from several others. Approximately $360,000 in tax credit sales from the project. The tax credits basically allow a business to forego a portion of their state taxes and put monies towards local projects. That's kind of the beauty of those. So that would get us through 5 years of that bond payment until the library expansion quality of life came off. And then that would then take over there. So that is the funding mechanism. Here is what is being proposed to send back to the rec. This has been going on for a couple years. I feel this is a very good project. I feel we have a chance to save a cherished building and provide Baldwin with its own community center, tax-free. No membership fees. This is free to the community. The project comes at no additional cost to the citizens at all. I believe it's time for the council to move forward. I really think it's a slam dunk, and I'd like to open it up to the council to discuss.
So what are the plans looking like now? Because I've been hearing there's been lots of different things going on.
We talked about the track change, about Is that what you're referring to?
Well, I just would like to see
Amaret just sent them out.
They're in your email.
We just had her send them. We thought we were gonna be in this packet here, so they're in your email. This is the brand new one that has the addition of the dais, and it's up there.
You know, you want me to move down.
So, Corey, can you talk to changes from what we originally saw? prior to this
So,
year?
yeah, so really, there's not much, it's that first level, the downstairs multi-purpose room there.
You won't see it on that.
Yeah.
You have to go down.
So the second floor is the one that has the 3 offices with the open office. And the first floor, but it's the one with obviously the stuff on the gym floor. It's the 2 multi-purpose rooms with the partition, yeah.
I think there's a better picture down further to show you the.
And this has the dais on here, right, Emma?
That one did not.
Is this the one you just, this is the one you
Yeah,
just sent me?
okay, we need the one that actually has the dais here. I'll send you that, I'll send that one again too, if you can pull it up real quick. Sorry to waste people's time here.
Why couldn't we have had this in our packet to begin with?
I asked for it to get printed, it just got missed.
Well, it makes it hard for us to, I like to sit and look at things and read stuff and form my questions before I get here.
Understood. The only change is that dais. That's all you'll see that's changed, as far as I don't think.
So
anything
the
else has changed.
elevator's
Yeah.
still in there?
The elevator's not in
No, the
there,
elevator's
but we've
not.
since spoken about the elevator being removed.
Okay, but, okay.
It's just the one change. We've certainly seen these plans multiple times because I feel like we've been talking about this forever.
There it is.
Yeah, so
This
you can
one
see,
right here.
yeah, so that would open up.
And then upstairs is just 2 classrooms.
Cost changes from, so where we at from an estimate? Has that changed?
We were always kind of subtracting the tax credits out of there, but we're kind of talking about it a little bit differently now with the private donations and then adding the tax credits, getting you to that mark. It's about 1.5 for the total project.
That's just an engineer's estimate.
We haven't sent out an RFP, or, right.
So have we applied for grants for this?
So, a little deterred from grants because we found out that whatever grants that we do get, you lose in the SHPO historic grant money. So it displaces it. So you'd have to catch up to hundreds of thousands of dollars before you would start to reap the benefits of the other grants. It would just, you're already getting the big grant for restoring the historic building.
It would have to be a pretty substantial grant.
But have we looked into it? Have we even applied for a grant?
So whatever grant you would have to apply for, or whatever group of grants you have to apply for, would have to exceed the amount that we're already getting for restoring the historic building, the SHPO grant. How much is that?
The tax credit.
The tax
Right,
credits.
That's-
yeah.
Right, sorry, tax credits, yes. So whatever, so the tax credits were what? 3, so you'd have to get that much money in grant before you would even, and then all you're doing is canceling out grant money, you're not winning anything. You're making lateral moves until you reach that threshold, and then you can't get those tax credit, and then, so you're basically not accepting the tax credit. You're saying, I don't wanna go tax credits, I'm gonna do a grant funding mechanism instead.
But I suspect it would take multiple grants to get to that level.
Right, there would be, yeah, that was not recommended.
I'd also like to add, Corey, you did a great job covering
Sure,
everything.
please, no,
But,
anybody ask anything.
As part of the citizen-led group, you touched on the 2 surveys, but they also spend, countless hours going out, talking to the community. And a couple of messages, key takeaways that we consistently heard were, one, everybody loves the Bauer Building and wanted us to save it and do something with it. Community center was overwhelmingly the choice that people had. Secondly was they didn't want their taxes raised. Property tax, specifically.
Right.
They would bring that back to almost every meeting.
Right, right.
So 1.5 million for the whole project, and that includes the tax credits, or 1.5?
Includes the tax credits, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we wouldn't be bonding, or would we just pay for it?
Well, we probably, if, with,
By we, I mean you guys.
with the money we've raised from the private sector and the sale of the tax credits, that's what would pay for that bond.
Okay,
So we would go ahead and bond for the whole amount because of the low interest
Right.
rates, and then just use that money.
and you can't get the tax credits until the
Until the-
project is complete.
Correct.
So
Because
So you have to have that money up front,
Right.
yeah.
You have to,
you do get it, it's.
Right.
correct. You have to sell them.
So what would the debt service be on that, considering we would get a
Glenn?
chunk of it back?
Yeah, if you're looking at a total of 1.5 million, and this is just, again, we're estimating the cost of money right now, which is under 2%. 20-year bond issue, you're looking at about 90,000 a year for debt service on that, at current interest rates.
Can you bond out the entire amount and get the tax credit back and spend that on operations? Is that allowed?
Yeah, because you're selling something, you're selling the tax credits.
Okay, so we can do whatever we want.
Correct.
Tax credits.
It's just like, so the private sector gets to sell federal tax credits and state, we only get to sell state side.
But what are the rules around bonding for more than the project costs for actual construction?
Glenn?
Well,
Now, that would be the actual construction cost.
the actual construction would still be 1.5.
You're just
recouping-
paying a
Oh,
different,
right,
paying back a
right.
different way, so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's in the 90,000, it would be funding part of that, potentially.
Right, yeah, and, you're gonna sell those bonds in the market right now, and like I said, their interest rates have still been historically low. So there's a great opportunity for it, but at 1.5, that's what you're gonna, so you have to come up with 90,000 a year. So whether you're paying through cash or tax credit or whatever mechanism, really, you'll have to identify that in your bond document, how you're gonna pay it back. Bondholders are gonna wanna see that.
My question is how do we, keep saying we, but it won't be me here in a few months, or in a few meetings. How do you weigh this out with the other quality of life projects or things that might require that tax money in a few years, once that becomes available? I think this is a good project, how do you consider that with everything else you need to consider?
I will say one point to that. So I don't foresee that you would require the entire quality of life sales tax, the sunsetted portion, right? 90,000 for the half cent
I don't
sales
think they'll
tax
take all of it, no.
is not gonna take all of it in the first place, and that, I'm gonna go back to my point, and it was Julie's also, is that whatever we raise from this point on makes that a lower number.
So how is that, as far as maintenance and stuff through years? Not just the first year, but continuing on, how are you gonna pay for that?
Well, I remember Jay saying that essentially this is gonna be a brand new building. I mean, the work that's gonna be done to it is, we're just keeping the bones. So he was guessing that maintenance would be fairly minimal as far as needing anything updated or replaced for several years.
Okay, so but if you're hiring somebody, you're gonna have to pay a salary, right?
Right.
Okay. Where's this money coming from for that?
So, earlier on, if you remember, when we were having a budget discussion, it was the question of whether or not to accept the assessed value, which ended up being approximately $90,000, give or take. We had expressed a desire to sort of earmark that money. So the first thing that we definitely identified was the cost of living increase, the salary increases for the city staff. And that's gonna end up taking about 60,000 of it there. The remainder of that, the assessed value is that, I mean, you can throw darts anywhere, but this is kind of one that jumped out to me as to where that would be a logical place for that money to come out of, and that would be the assessed valuation, which we always accepted. That would be the remaining balance of the city staff raises. That's just one place.
So I think the fundamental answer, Julie, is we have to find a place for the budget every year, right? And I think the plan is, at least initially, this is what would happen. We have to make that decision every year. What's the budget look like? What's the appraised value go to? Do we want to stay mill levy neutral, revenue neutral? That forces budget decisions all over the place. This would be one of them, right? But we would kind of be encumbered to figure it out, if we go down this path. So I think the initial plan fits in the budget, and it would just be a planning event every year. There might be different ways to fund it. We don't know what the revenue is yet. That might offset it, might shrink the amount that needs to be funded. But to your point, there's going to be operating costs, electric maintenance, all that. We probably need to get a handle on, at least have an idea as we're going through it, so we know what that's going to cost. But it really is just a budget line item now for operating this thing going forward. And I think the $0.25 quality of life sales tax is one potential that a future council could use, but it doesn't force them to do that. They could find something else in the budget to do it with and not do something else. So it's just, as you know, every year it's a clean slate. You got to figure out what you want to do, how much money you have, and this is just going to add to that. But it would be a budget discussion every year.
So we're thinking of using the quality of life that when the library comes off, right?
We don't get to say. This council doesn't get to say. It's the council when that comes off. makes that decision.
Certainly a possibility.
It's 5 years from now, right.
$100-some thousand annually that comes available for that council to do whatever they want with it. If they don't use it for this, they have to figure out how to fund this at other places in the budget. Just what
So we could keep it for the library, right?
future council can do, what they want, for sure.
What's the next step with this agreement?
We would approve it and send it back to the rec, and then the next step after that, if we choose to do so, would be to give Glenn permission to send out for RFP.
So having just seen this,
Yeah, I'm not gonna vote on this tonight.
so having just seen this, I mean, a couple of my concerns that pop out, and I know it's real time, but I think as a council, we need to decide what do we strive for availability? What's our ultimate best case scenario? How often do we want this thing open? And to me, it's probably different during the school year than it is for the summer.
Sure.
But until you decide how much availability you want to have, it's hard to decide how to go do that. So if 7 to 9 and 4 to 6 is all we want, here's one solution that works. If that's what the council feels is enough, availability throughout the year to have this thing walk-in available. My opinion is no, it's not. But it's going to be a decision based on what's it cost to do more versus we kind of know where we're at to do this much.
Right.
But I don't think as a council we've discussed that really on what we want to see from a citizen availability perspective. So let's discuss it.
Yes.
Let's.
And with that in spirit, Scott, it's a fine point. It's absolutely a fine point, and I love it. If you're feeling any urgency from me, it's because we have $245,000 in donations on the table that I don't want to see slip away. And so I've seen this thing go dormant many times, and there's money just sitting there that could easily be
Okay, So what happens if the rec doesn't want to do this?
Then we will come back and discuss how to do it with the city staff member, and how to fund that. So all we're basically doing is giving the rec in this scenario $25,000 to fund it themselves. We would just then take back that same $25,000 and discuss if that number with our resources is the same number, which I'm guessing it's not, and where to go from there. That has always been the plan B if the rec never fought it.
So is this just gonna be one staff member that's gonna be there? Because I don't think that's a good idea, if it's just one person in there by themselves.
Yeah, I have some
So
apprehension
would
about that as
increase-
well.
That would increase the price again.
Well, it depends on how you look at it, I guess. I mean, you know, that staff member, if they're managing that, they could also go out and get volunteers or work with Baker with their physical ed department and do some things that are outside the box. It doesn't mean you just have to hire staff.
It's kind of their, once you hire that position, it's kind of that position's responsibility to envision how they want that position to be. You know, volunteer based, request another staff member. I mean, it's their role. That's their job.
I'm going to disagree with you a little bit there. I mean, I think it's up to the council to be very clear what we want. And if this person that's staffing it doesn't feel we need a second person, but the council does, it's not really, shouldn't be their responsibility. I think it's putting way too much on a part-time person that, you know, I think we're going to end up being responsible for how that thing's operated.
Obviously, the conversation changes if it comes back from the rec and we get a no. Obviously, that conversation changes.
Well, I just even mean this with a single,
Right.
single
With
person.
this plan, Matt indicated to me that he would want 2 people.
This is with two, yeah.
Is that in there?
No, but
Okay.
this is a Sullivan Square.
Okay.
This is Sullivan Square. I mean,
Right.
that's what this is.
So I
That
think we
was
need
the
to
starting
be a
point.
lot more specific about when this comes to action, about this is exactly what everybody's agreeing to. You know, there's hours, staffing.
Right.
You know, then I think we can make a decision we're willing to live with. And so I guess, you know, part of the discussion is, you know, is 4 hours a day enough in those time slots? Do we want more? If we increase the share of what the rec commission got from the rentals on all the properties, would they be willing to maybe do more hours? I mean, let's go back to availability. We never really got past that. I mean, what does this council want to see this building open for? School year, summer, two different schedules.
Personally, I want it open.
8 to 5, 7 to 6.
I think your morning folks should be able to get in there.
Yep.
And I think your evening folks should be able to get in there both for good chunks of time. And I agree that this is bare bones.
Okay.
So the afternoon is 4 to 6?
That's this proposal.
This is the proposal, yeah.
Yeah. Because I can't see that the adults are gonna wanna be in there when the kids are in there after school.
Yeah.
So.
So what's your perspective on availability?
Well, you know, I can't speak to that because I don't know how it's gonna be staffed.
So take the staffing out, because the way I'd like to approach it is, let's
Well,
figure
let's
out what we
maybe two
want and then
people.
we'll staff it accordingly. We'll do the costing accordingly.
I mean, so
So
here's the deal. So Matt asked us to give us, for us to talk and find out what to send to his board. So this is a blank slate. So whatever's in red, whatever's in black, play with it. This is a blank slate. This is just kind of what the committee felt could be palatable, at least as a starting point.
And that's how we saw it, as the starting point.
Sure.
It would obviously have to evolve. There's gonna be a demand for more hours, and we know that. But we need to start somewhere. We need to move this project forward somehow.
I don't really see why it has to be moved forward.
Because there's $265,000 on the table.
have we got any indication that any of that's time bound? Or is that just you guys worried about it?
I'm personally just worried about it.
Okay, we've got no indication that anybody's put a deadline on that.
No.
So let's not operate under the assumption that that's real. until we do get that indication.
You get the indication when they take their money back.
So
It's too late.
I would think that somebody donating money would want to actually see more about how it's actually being used, as opposed to a lot of unknowns. So I don't see adding this detail at all would move somebody back off of donating money. So I would prefer to see us fully have a plan, and not a creeping commitment plan, a plan that we believe we can fund out of the current budget. It doesn't completely, encumber future councils to something that's going to be onerous. But I don't see the need, I don't see the timeline, I don't see the urgency to start until we have a commitment to a plan and a way to fund it.
I'm going to clarify the urgency. So my personal urgency, like I said, this has reached a lot of goals. I think the committee's personal urgency is not wanting to see it die when it's this close. It could potentially be this close, if that makes sense.
It does.
That's where I'm at.
I get that. I mean, I get, the committee being as close as they are has a different sense of urgency to it.
Sure.
And I fully respect that. I just don't share it. Maybe I would if I were on the committee. I doubt it, because I just want to make sure we do fully thought through. It's a big investment. To have unknowns it just bothers me. And I think we can figure out the availability piece. It's not that hard. Either we decide not to do it more than what we have, or this is it, and we all agree and we move on. But we haven't had the discussion.
So, I mean, that's what we're asking for, is for the council to keep ongoing discussions, because how many times has
I'm
it
with
died?
So let's just get something out there and we can pick it apart, right? So, I heard
That's kind of what we're doing.
7 to 6, is 7 to 6 year round what we want to shoot for? And then if it's not doable from a cost perspective, then we have to fall back to something less. Let's figure out how we go attack this and get to a resolution with concrete numbers.
So again, yes. So here's the deal with that. So this has kind of been the challenge of this whole process, is kind of being at the mercy of the recs buy-in or not. So here we are again, we're asking the rec if they want, they actually asked us to come up with this and send it back. These hours would change if that's now a position that has to manage other properties for us to fund that position, right? You would have to have some downtime for managing the Sullivan Square and the golf course in the scenario that's where that funding mechanism comes from. So we got a situation here, we got to send it back and say, here's a rough draft, and I mean, we're back there again.
I guess really, I think to Scott's point is, to come up with hours that are palatable to the council, right? What we feel like is, as a council, is a fair offer to the rec to fund those hours, and then see what the rec says based off of that. Is that?
Well, I mean, I fully respect the rec's decision to say this is really, from our programming perspective, what we think is doable.
Sure.
Do we fill that in? If they, or do we go back and say, if we paid you more, i.e. through the rental fees going to you, or a more payment, would you expand the hours? Or, so if this is it, this is all I want to do, I fully respect that. We either work around it, or we do something completely.
So a lot of these numbers, Scott, were based off of 2 part-time employees around 1,000 hours at $12. So that's to keep them under the requirement of paying, the retirement and different things like that. So that's where 25,000, 2 part-timers every day,
Right.
about 1,000 hours.
Right.
That's kind of how that was developed into it.
Okay.
So just to give perspective there.
Am I allowed to say anything if somebody asks me?
Technically not, but go ahead and step up, and you'll have to state your name and address for the record.
Jenny Michael, live 312 Santa Fe Drive, Baldwin City, Kansas. I'm on the rec commission, I'll have to admit that. I'm a retired teacher, I'm a coach, and I love pickleball and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how long ago this was made available to either Glenn, Casey, or both. This is exactly what you asked us for, which is basically an analysis of different sets of hours, the cost, what we would need to be able to answer some of your questions. We have 3 scenarios here, 3 different sets of hours, 8 to 6, depending on the day of the week. We have 6 to 8, 12 to 6 on Sunday, different scenarios. And we always are going to have 2 people there if this was going to be our responsibility, for no other reason than safety. I'm not gonna,
So,
and then the third scenario is basically what's called a scattered, which we don't favor, but it's one of those that several days of the week you have these hours, several days of the week you'd have these hours. And the cost analysis. What would the employment fee be? What would the cleaning fee be? What would everything be? Subtract what we would be already paying for rent in our present facility, utilities, phone and internet, subtracting that, and then letting you know how much we figured it would cost for us to run that. Now, this has been made available.
This was discussed in 2 committees.
So how many have you, I'm going to ask this question, how many of you have seen this? Because if you haven't seen it, you should have, because you've asked us to do this, we have done this, and it hasn't been shared appropriately, evidently. I don't have much else to say other than I'm sort of embarrassed, to some degree ashamed of what's going on here. I'd also like to know, where is this in your strategic plan? Is this your biggest priority in your strategic plan? If it is, I really need to move.
So we think we definitely need to make this available.
yeah, I don't know why we haven't seen it already.
Because it wasn't proposed. I already have it. We talked about it in finance committee and CDC.
Can you just, can we make copies and put it on?
I think it is a potential scenario for different hours, different costs, and it should be. And I think it was considered, at least from a high level. And I think we were talking to the Boys and Girls Clubs, I think at that time, and, we hadn't decided on what the right, so it's just a cart before the horse, as far as I'm concerned. So we're getting options on how they would support it, but it's all irrelevant until the council decides how they want to have it open. And then those may or may not fit. This may or may not fit. So again, we need to start with the answer and work back to the solution. And we're getting a lot of different inputs about what the solutions could be, but I want the council to decide and then work back from that. You're going to get something you're willing to support. That's where it started.
I think that's the ask,
Yeah.
is to put some wheels on the thing.
So 7 to 6 year round, is that the ask? 1 or 2, what's the council's preference around number of people staffing that? I mean, those are the things then that you can balance costs against the different scenarios that have been proposed. And then if the costs are unpalatable, then we got to start trimming what we want.
I think that 6 closing time is gonna be too early. I think people are gonna wanna hang out there for a while, some people are gonna be in there till 10 o'clock, I really do. So maybe it's a situation where, 7 to 6, well, maybe it's 7 to noon, and then 4 to 9, something like that. It's just general hours. 'Cause I think people are gonna wanna be in there later. I think especially that junior high to high school age group will probably, you know, they'll be in that game room, they'll be playing ping pong or shooting pool or whatever, playing basketball. I think I'd like to see it, I'd like to see 9 at the latest, while still accommodating those early hours for the folks that want to walk in the winter and want to be in there in the morning. It's an 8-hour day. I mean, so if you're trying to make it an 8-hour day, if trying to make it one position or two part-time positions for an 8-hour day, I mean, you're gonna get, I mean, honestly, 7 to, well, I guess you go 7 to 11 and then 4 to 8, 5 to 9. That gets you 2 part-timers. Is that more palatable? I mean, obviously, it is more than this.
It doesn't get you 2 part-timers at a time.
Right.
So it gets you 1 part-timer in the morning, 1 part-timer in the afternoon.
Right, or 2 part-timers in the morning, 2 part-timers in the night.
Then, yeah, and then that number doubles.
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
Ryan, what do you think?
I feel like we're talking about something we don't know anything about, and that's okay. Because like Corey was saying, if, say this was a schedule, people are gonna come in wanting more. But I feel that we're talking about something that this organization isn't in the business of doing. I feel like it's, if we went to the rec and gave them the water tower and said, figure this out. We're in the business of water towers. I like this project. I think you're off to a good start as far as we're getting more information, but I agree with Julie. This is like a flood of stuff for me right now that I haven't seen yet. And I just need more time. I don't have much more time. You guys do. So I don't know. I think we're just guessing right now. Obviously, we want to open as much as it can be, but I don't know if it's doable.
So how do we move back past this stage to something more actionable?
And I kind of agree with Jenny too. Where does this fit into our strategic plan? We don't even have a strategic plan yet. So
So we don't do anything until we have a strategic plan?
that was,
We don't do any projects till we have a strategic plan? We have the last 2 years.
And we have a ton of community feedback.
I know, but
This
this
is
is,
overwhelming amount.
More community feedback on this than we did on the strategic plan.
I have an opinion about that too, but I'm not gonna go into that here because we're not discussing it, but I don't see the urgency. And I understand your, thought about the money thing, but, getting something at the council meeting is not appropriate. We should get this information beforehand. I mean, we can send this to the rec and see what they say. But, if we can't even figure out the hours, how are we gonna, what if they say, okay, we'll do it from, what you have here? And then you come back to them and say, well, we want it open 8 hours a day.
Well, that's how it goes, yeah. I mean, that's how it has to go, because if we didn't print this out and put it on the table, whether it should have been earlier or right now, it never got talked about again. So this is how you do it. This is how we talked about it.
I know, but when you give somebody a plan, and they go by that,
Mhm.
and then you come back to them later and say, well, we've decided that we're gonna change the hours, or we're not gonna give you 2 people to staff it. I mean, there's too many questions that I'm sure the rec would come up with. That we don't even know.
That's the hope for me. This is, as I understood it, we were given the impression that since it was not adding to the programming for the rec, that they were not interested and we were gonna move forward. That's the instructions that I felt we were given. If they are wanting to have that conversation, open that up again, I'll open it up as many times until the ribbon cutting. That's me, I'm speaking for me. If we're back to the table again, hallelujah. let's keep doing it.
Trust me, I feel your pain here. I remember a certain project with a splash pad that had 62 people in this room. And when it came time to vote on that, I was the chair of CDC. I didn't want to do it. I tried talking everybody out of doing it. And we did, and we moved forward, and we lucked into it working out. We have a lot of partners who've made that work, including the RAC. I don't know, though. I think this is something, I don't know if we can talk about this on the strategic plan session on the 4th. I don't know if that'll fit in or not. Why I think we should discuss this as part of a strategic plan, it's not so much is this a good project and it's urgent, it's what about the pool in 5 years? What about the library in 5 years? What about the other things? This may still rise to the top, but we just haven't weighed it out with the other projects and the other needs over time. I like what you've presented so far today. I just need more time to process that, and I keep saying I'm running out of time. But as a group, more discussion so that we don't feel the pressure to make a decision right now. Maybe this is something we can talk about on that session. I don't know what their plan is. This was a priority at our first strategic planning session, like you brought up. It came up in those community conversations. I noticed it come up several times in both of those sessions, reading through it. I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't discuss it further then. I don't know. We can't vote on it, obviously.
Can't vote on it, but we can,
And sometimes that's when the best discussion happens.
No question for a vote.
Right.
Right.
we can obviously discuss on it. I mean, I guess I go back to, Brian, you mentioned, Sullivan Square, and definitely remember that. This portion of Sullivan Square didn't even come until 6 months after construction was started. So, I guess it's a good thing that we're talking about it now.
Yeah, because what Brian said is he feels lucky that it worked out. I don't want to feel lucky. I want to at least feel like we did as much due diligence as we possibly could, and there still may give me some luck involved. But I don't want to have to do this and hope that the programming and availability comes. I won't support that.
Right.
So I would recommend we have this on old business every council meeting until we decide what to
We got
do.
4 thumbs up on that.
We may not have much to talk about, but it gives us the opportunity to digest this, anything else that comes in, the rec commission's 3 scenarios, and then we can come forward. We know it's on the agenda, bring the questions out. And I think that's the only way, short of a lot of work sessions, which we still can do, to get into consensus about how we want to move forward. It's just too sporadic. You guys have committee meetings, so you're seeing a lot more than the rest of us, so it's hard to understand that a lot of this is new, and we may not have seen it as much as we think we have, but I just think if it's as important as it is, and there's time sensitivity, let's just put it on old business until we take it off because we do something one way or the other.
Like I said, the only thing I wanted to express from my personal one council seat here is that, we're sitting here with a building, we're sitting here with $245,000 in committed money, and it's hard to sit on. And how long have we had that money sitting here where it hasn't been on the agenda, where it hasn't been talked about? And so you'll excuse me for gnawing at the bit a little bit, because it's
I guess
It's a good project, and it's just sitting there.
Go ahead and put out RFPs so we can get more concrete data. Because right now, all we have is an engineer's estimate.
I think the more data we have, real data we have, the better decision we're gonna make. As long as it's a non-binding RFP.
An RFP is just a bid.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm all for,
It'll give
Real
us
data.
more concrete facts to work off of.
exactly.
That's how Sullivan Square was, wasn't it?
Yeah, we put out an RFP and then brought that
Early.
early.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I motion we put out an RFP for the power building.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Holy cow.
Whew.
I can't believe the CDC didn't recommend that like months ago.
You should have said that in a budget.
Ouch. Touche. But let's
So-
just keep the conversation.
So what about this? I mean, Can you give us can the council give us some sort of direction then on, because, I mean, if we leave where we're at right now, we're gonna be having the same discussion. Something to go back with at some point, what does the council want to see? What hours do you?
I agree. To me, that's the first decision, and we are not the experts on community centers, so all we can do is put something out here in public forum about what we want to see and get community feedback, like it's too much, it's not enough.
Well, let's
Give
start.
community feedback and rec feedback, because they've requested us to send them something.
I'll tell you what I feel strongly about is having 2 staff members there at all times when it's open. I think that
What's the safety?
Oh,
it's
yeah.
too big of a building, stuff happens.
Yeah, it's a
You just-
very large building.
It's the safety issue is the number one issue for me. So I don't want to just go with one person there.
I agree.
So I think that goes back to a budgetary discussion as well then.
Well, again, if we start with what the council would like to see, we put numbers to it, either city staff themselves or the rec commission or a combination, and we say, wow, you know, do we need to start scaling back because it doesn't fit in the budget or it's too much? But until we get to that point, I don't know how we can start making those, you know,
Okay, so we
bad
got,
decisions.
we got 2 staff members down. What hours?
So to me, I think it's different hours in the summer versus school. I mean, I think in the summertime, I would think you'd want it available throughout the day for kids to pop in and out. And it's obviously not the case during a school year. You don't need that open while they're in school. But maybe it's to what you talked about, you know, for the adults, a different 2-set band. So I think I'd be comfortable with 2 different seasonal hour, you know, with 2 people. If we try to schedule 8 hours a day, or maybe if we start with that, then I think we have a framework to start from. You know, school year, it was whatever 8 hours you indicated.
Just a suggestion.
In summertime, you know, it would be, you know, 7 to 5, or we may have to expand it. So let's pick something that we can then put some numbers to.
I assume.
I get what Scott's saying, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think it's important to say earlier on that we're leaving the weekends off the table. The weekends are kind of maybe for events and they maybe Sunday evolves into whatever it's gonna evolve into, but we just, as far as planning purposes and getting something out there, what's palatable weekday staffing? Am I hearing that? Or am I wrong?
And you thought about that.
I think right now it's critical we leave, especially Saturdays open for events. I think.
Okay. At least a portion of Saturday.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So, I guess to Scott and Corey's point, school year 7 to 11 and then 4 to 8? Is that what we're kind of looking at for hours?
Obviously, the later the better, as you approach 9 or 10, but at 8 is palatable.
I don't know though. I think 9 might be better than 11.
Hey, you ain't gonna pull mine over.
over.
So you're thinking, Brian, 7 to 10 and then
Well, 9. What'd you say, 7 to 11?
7 to 11
Oh,
4
yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
So,
Morning.
Yeah, I just wonder at 11 in the morning.
yeah,
I agree with Corey. I think 9 at night. Probably would have more. I don't know.
so maybe 7 to 10 in the morning and then 4 to 9 at night.
Let's start with that. I mean, if we, you know, if we're dealing with part-time hourly, you know, do we have to stick to an 8-hour day?
No,
Right, so, but that's a good starting
If you have-
point. You
if
see
you
what
have
the costs are,
part-time.
it's like, well, we
Right.
can't even afford that, so we need to skinny it down, but if that looks doable, we could add an hour in the morning or the evening. You know, we could do weekends, if we kind of know what the hourly rate starts to look like per person.
so summer.
Summer, you know, you'd be more, I guess you'd gravitate more toward it being open more in the afternoon, right? That you wouldn't want that blank space, because kids are running around, you know, okay.
I'd say the early morning, you know,
They'll be outside.
they'll be outside.
And, yeah. I guess in a lot of your early morning users too, the school year captures the winter months where people would want to be doing their walking indoors, so maybe that's something that you could borrow from in the summer to cheat a little bit. Maybe open 8 or 9 and save an hour in the afternoon, meet it there somehow. I don't know.
Still have a kitchen area.
The warming kitchen's
Yeah.
still in there for events, yeah. Yeah,
I just
nothing
looked
else changed
I
besides
just
the
looked at the
elevator.
community center in Ottawa, the Don Woodward Community Center, and it closes at 8,
When's it open?
6:30.
Continuous?
Mhm.
Maybe we should talk to them and see how those hours work for them.
Well, they have a rec center too.
Oh, they have a
Yeah.
Oh, well, it'd be nice if we had one of those too. It's another conversation.
That's a big one.
I'm kind of picturing like chamber luncheons and stuff like that in the middle of the day,
Oh, yeah.
especially if it has like a warming kitchen.
But they could still
Yeah.
use it.
Yeah.
For an event, if there's an event.
Also, the floor plan, I mean, everything from the ceiling essentially came down, but there's still, this is still, it's not a permanent plan here. Nobody's swung a hammer yet. There's still that partitioning to where you could have stuff on one end and still have open gym on the other. I mean, there's still, it's a 10,000 square foot building. I mean, you can have multiple things going on on it.
So during council meetings, there'll be basketball.
No.
So we're thinking 1 to 9 in the summer?
Yeah. I think we start with that, hopefully get some community feedback, and, if the council agrees that's acceptable to move forward, we adjust, as to your point, as we get feedback real time if we can. We're comfortable with starting with this plan and funding it this way, and evolve into whatever it needs to evolve to.
Next, new business, library mural. Wendy, you wanna?
You guys have questions? Or do you-
So,
You got a very thorough mini novel from me that was part of the grant application, so there's a lot of information there. At least I think they did, right? They got the application, okay.
Is it in there? I always remember is the pictures.
Just the picture. I only put the pictures in.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I haven't.
Oh.
I only had the pictures.
Okay, well, let me tell you. The library worked with the community mural program and the Main Street program, and we came up with a mural of our own that has secured private donations as well as a grant. It's about a $12,000 project, all paid for. And what it does is it adds a mural to the library, but also these musical instruments that coordinate with the mural that look like plants and butterflies and things, but they have a musical element to them. And so it also adds an element of connecting all of the murals in the community mural program together. So it provides, if you've seen the QR code markers that we did for the Lucy Sullivan tour through the HCC grant that we got, similar kind of idea where you then link it together. Plus, folks can scan that code and get information about each mural to pop up. So it's a mixture between private donations, grant funding. It's been approved by the library board. I ran it by Glenn as well before I applied for the grant. And both Main Street and the community mural program have taken a look and are partners in the effort. I think that, tell me what other questions you have, but.
thank you, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.
Any council discussion? This was discussed in CDC already, so.
What is the CDC thing? I mean, what was the discussion you guys had?
Same thing you're presented with right now. Just,
No other discussion of that?
no, I think it's just more the formality that it came through CDC, and it was discussed, and now it's being presented to council. It's pretty straightforward.
So is there a choice between option A or B?
No, I think everything's already approved.
Okay. That's what was, got it. That makes sense.
Yeah, it was already approved when it came to CDC.
Yes,
So the only reason we
Yeah,
went
this
through
was
city
just-
I
council.
just saw option 1, option 2.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Two options,
It took us
No, the
another
city-
hour to
the-
figure that out.
What'd you come up with? What'd you decide?
Like mushrooms.
No, the city's not funding this or anything, it's all grant funded. It's just a city building, so it has to be approved by the council.
So it's the bigger one?
Is there an option?
That would be a Wendy. Sorry, Wendy.
So we held off when I found out that the city needed to approve, so I actually haven't done any purchasing or anything just in case it wasn't. So everything's still on the table, so I guess if you have an opinion, you're also welcome to come talk with the artist and I. Meg Cundiff is the artist that we're working with. Yeah, so I don't have an answer for that. It was essentially if we wanted to do a longer one for more of the wall or keep it shorter and more contained. But it's all on this area right outside of the building.
So you have money either way.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it'd just be trading off. The mushrooms are the most expensive actually. So it's like how many mushrooms can we get if we do a bigger mural, like that kind of trade-off.
And those are the instruments?
Yeah, so the mushroom's kind of like a big drum and it makes, and then the flowers kind of have the petals, it's kind of like a xylophone kind of a thing. Yeah.
I don't see that in the picture, so.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Any more discussion on this? No, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the flowery mushroom mural thing.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Oh, aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on new business is the resolution for North 400 Road. So this was discussed in public safety as well as the community development committee. Brought it to both places. I was approached by the residents at the new senior living on the north end of Fire Tree about North 400 Road that people drive down and it brings dust over into their properties. A lot of them have health problems, so it's become kind of a health concern for them. They signed a petition. It's a county road, so it's obviously goes to the county, but they asked if we could help, and I said, well, we could talk to the council, and if the council's willing to, we can pass a resolution in support of your petition and send it up to the county with that. A little bit more behind their petition to try to help them. I think their petition asked for a couple things, one, dust mitigation of some sort, and then the address safety concerns with people speeding coming out of, I think it's Ridge Lane, is the name of that road, that leads to 400 Road. So that is what this is, in a nutshell.
Why do we need a resolution to have those conversations with the county and the township?
It just shows a vote of support. It shows that the council's behind that. We don't need the resolution to have those discussions, but I felt that it would be appropriate for the council to discuss it. And then, again, if they so choose to support the resolution, to have it signed off by the city council, that they support this measure. I mean, Susan, Julie, Corey, you guys talked about it in your committee, so if you have anything to add from discussion in the committees, feel free.
I think you pretty much summed it up.
Yeah.
I mean, they, we're concerned about that dust and stuff. And it's a county road, so. I think we need to see if the county will help us out.
Right on.
I don't have a problem with it, I just don't want to I just don't want it to be, I guess if you look at the wording, I just don't want it to be where we will mitigate this at any cost. And I don't want to get into a situation where we've committed to mitigate it because we don't know what it is.
We can't anyways, because it's not our road. We don't own that
I
road.
understand. We could, so we don't own the actual mitigation, but we certainly own the cost to do something to it.
We could assist in the cost
We could do it all if we got the county to
if the county approved it.
My point is, I just want to make sure that we don't, this sets precedents, and I don't want to necessarily bind us to a a number that we don't know what it is yet. So
And
I
I
like
think-
the discussion, but I don't want to commit to anything yet.
And I think Blake can speak to this, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, but this resolution won't bind us to anything.
No.
This is just supporting the underlying petition that's been signed by the residents.
If I remember, I think a few years ago, maybe the county came down and did some sort of dust mitigation on that diagonal road, if I remember right.
Yeah, I think you're right. As probably before we paved that section that you see in there now, which we did a couple years ago, and it's held up great. Wish we could go farther up, but again, we're stuck with it as a county/township road. It's their responsibility on that whole section there. The county, we talked to them a couple years ago. They said if there were problems with the bridge, they would look at that, but they weren't interested in paving any more of that stretch of road in there. And the township has very little funds. They're stretched every year to do what they normally do. So it's unlikely they'll do. And I suspect when they get this, they'll counter with, really the landowners should either pave it or pay for whatever the mitigation is, rather than have everybody else do it at large. That's their typical response to that.
I thought benefit district, I mean, it starts to feel like that, you know, if we're gonna fund any of this, it's to support some residents, but not.
What's weird about it is the benefit district, I don't know if those property lines butt up to that road. So it'd be another neighborhood paying for an improvement to another neighborhood to keep, because I don't think those property lines, there's that mountain, that ridge that goes all
The
the
property
way.
still goes to the.
It still goes to the line,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So, but then it would be only the houses on the
It'd be
north side
only
of
the
road.
senior living.
Right, right.
And that's not what I'm proposing at all. I'm just proposing again to support.
I get you, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves, so.
Yeah. I mean, let's go over and see something.
Yeah,
So if the county says, yeah, that probably needs to be done, and you guys can do it, is that a possibility?
I think
The
we have
county
to
will-
talk about it, but, I mean, the dust mitigation is ran by the county. And that's where the residents that live in the country pay anyways, to have them mitigate the dust in front of their house, so. I think, if the county's telling us to pay them for their program that they're already down here on some of our roads.
Well, I'm just-
That doesn't
I'm
feel
just-
right to me.
I'm just thinking that, you know, it's gonna come back to us if the county doesn't want to do anything with it.
They probably will, because there are residents, and at that point, that's when we'll have to make a decision,
Right,
if we wanna do something, or if we don't.
right. I think that's what you were.
yeah, you know, I think we're gonna get to that at some point. just wanna make sure-
I hope the county steps
I
in.
do too. Yeah, I don't know how they're gonna do speed control, other than maybe some large speed bumps or, you know, I'm not sure what you could do other than that to slow down traffic there.
I don't even think it's posted,
That's the
I don't
first
think
thing.
so either.
so.
I mean, you answered all my questions on this resolution, so I'm.
All right, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we send this resolution to the Douglas County, for approval.
Second.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds good.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next, council committee reports, budget finance, Scott.
So by our billing, we covered that. We're gonna continue to cover that. What's here? Should have it ready. So we talked about, again, the water, actually the utility rate restructuring. You know, what we'd like to do is get in front of the council. So the restructuring for the billing plus revisit the 2022 rate changes that we've already talked about baked in. So I just want to make sure we have that discussion at the same time to talk about how the billing, closing the billing would change, because it could get lost in how the bill changes. So have that conversation, you know, ideally, would we talk first meeting in December,
Yeah, we're hoping to bring it in December.
and then, you know, maybe have a second discussion around that on the second meeting, and if everybody's comfortable, we adopt the utility format, billing format, and again, unless we want to make changes to what we decide on the rates, we just leave those in our.
Could there be a printout with that information
we will bring that. So the plan is to show current and future, and current charges, future charges, and talk about what's in both. The bottom line billing should be the same, it's just gonna look differently on the lines you get. So it'll be that discussion, so everybody's comfortable and can explain it to people who ask, and then we'll decide if that's how we want to go forward. And the intent is to get the bond payments into the, what we're calling the meter flash bond, and I guess we could talk about the naming of that as well. That will be just that and only that, and everything else is going to go into the consumption fee. And we can talk about what that looks like. So the rates will change because some of the stuff that was in the consumption fee is moving up into the meter fee. So it will look like the consumption fee changes or your rate changes. But if not, it's just that things are on a different line than they were before. So that's why we want to have the rate discussion at the same time, talk about where they are and if they're moving, where they're going to. Again, we've already had that discussion, but we want to revisit it so everybody's clear. Okay. But yeah, I'm like you, if we can see it, we can point to it, touch it, ask questions, so yeah.
And if I did it beforehand, it's even better.
Well, I think to your point, if it's not enough beforehand at the meeting, then it's the next meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, with the substation, when that comes before the council, it'd be easy to plug that in and see what that would look like, right?
That's a good point.
Debt service on there.
Yes.
That's gonna be a big one.
The other debt service falling off.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And as the ordinance we pass, where we do some bonding, we have to identify where that's gonna be funded from. It's gonna go right to that line item on your utility bill. And we can show you what it's gonna go to, where it's at today, and what it's gonna go to, based on the amount of bonds we gotta go on. So, for transparency perspective, I think it's the right thing to do. I'll talk about that. The last thing we talked about in there is the library funding, discussion around, 2023. We're already starting to think about that. The request was to remove the mill levy cap, or at least go from 4 to 5, and the reasons behind that. Discussion around going to a district library, which, from a budget and finance committee, without a doubt, the financial impact moving to a district library is positive for the city, very positive for the city. So just from a budget perspective, that's the right thing to do. However, there's a lot of other issues with doing that have to be considered about. First of all, the city can't force that to happen. We don't have any ability to bring that to a vote. It has to come from the district. But, so we looked at it from a budget and finance perspective. It certainly positively impacts our budget relative to the mills currently going to the library. But there's a whole bunch of other issues around it that you shouldn't just look at it from a budget perspective, and that's kind of what we came to. So that will be ongoing discussion with the library next year, early as possible, about 2023 budget, what they need, do we want to remove, change the mill levy cap, and that whole conversation. We're going to bring them in as early as we do any of the departments and kind of treat them like a department as we go through the budget process. So we can make some, holistic budget decisions on that. So we talked about that as well. That's it.
You done, Corey?
So we met yesterday on the 15th. Had several issues. I'll kind of go through them as thoroughly as I can here. So the first thing we talked about was the HEAL grant, which stands for Historic Economic Asset Lifeline. Lieutenant Governor Tolland recently announced that this was going to be available. It applies to Main Street districts. It is $75,000 in matching funding from the state to go toward revamping basically your building. Multiple businesses can apply. Multiple can be awarded the grant. It is up to $75K, and you do have to be a historic building, and that's all it really kind of specifies. It doesn't really say what defines historic, and you have to be in the Main Street district. So certainly welcomed and encouraging people to who fall in that district, who own buildings, to certainly look into that program. in that grant, we kind of identified maybe a couple buildings. One of the city buildings we kind of thought would be a good candidate was the old gas station, right on the corner there. It's currently being used as a garden shed, as I understand, which we would certainly find another place for that if we ever did anything there. But just tossing it out. It's an old gas station, kind of cool. The Gold Leaf petition came through CDC. We just discussed that one. The Heritage Crosswalk, that's where Santa Fe Drive goes into Heritage there and crosses 56. You know, they had already declined, KDOT had already declined the speed limit reduction, and they had already declined the stopping of traffic. So all they've agreed to is basically blinking lights, like hazard lights, so you can cross, and hopefully somebody sees the light. I kind of wish there had been more, but that's what we have been dealt. But basically, the engineer that had been working on it with BG retired, and so we just brought it to the committee to get in touch with whoever replaced them to keep the conversation going.
I'm sorry.
Please,
can I
yeah.
interrupt you? Can we apply or whatever to KDOT again to see if we can get that?
It took me 2
Revisited.
years to get to that point, to allow for a crosswalk. I mean, literally 2 years of emailing, calling, trying to get senators on
I
board.
know it's been a long time, but, you know, we just.
I mean, we can try, but they did a traffic study, and I doubt that within the last 12 months, they were gonna come back out and bear that expense to do another traffic study. Until growth happens in that area. is
Or
basically-
incidents.
Or incidents, a large amount of incidents, and
We had one.
Right.
yeah, but that wasn't caused by the crosswalk, or the crossing. That incident, that was just traffic.
Well, but it was on the highway, and that's kind of why we want the speed reduced and to have a light there.
And yeah, and I get all that, and I pushed for all that, but their study, and they specifically told us after their study was completed, that until we see more growth in this area, I mean, it just doesn't, our study, based on our matrix that we used for this, it doesn't call for it.
Did they do that study during the pandemic, or did they do that?
They did, and that was one of my complaints, but again, it's KDOT, I mean, you know, I was fortunate enough just to get them to get out here and do something about it.
You get any indication how far off we were from having, we're 10% more would be there, or are we 50% of where we have to get to volume wise to?
We kind of talked about it a little bit, and, we talked about the future development in that area. And they indicated kind of around that if that was developed, then that would probably give us the, to get more done in that area. So,
It just seems weird, because you come in from the west side, and it's like 45 at the school, and then it drops to 35. But,
From the east, you coming in hot.
yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree.
I
I
agree.
used to live in Heritage with a little
I
kid,
know.
so, I mean,
it's super dangerous. Go ahead, Corey, I'm sorry.
No, good. No, that's what we talked about doing that more. Fireworks ordinance, we made a commitment, earlier on after the 4th of July to not let that get lost till late June. So it is already on the next agenda. We had like 7 agenda items and we'd already gotten down the line a little bit. We agreed to kick it down, but it was on the agenda. I do have to announce that it was there. We did move it, but it will be discussed in a timely fashion. Library mural, like I said, that was more just a formality. City building had to come through CDC. No concerns over the mural, came through council. Let's see, I don't think I missed anything on the HEAL grant. Yeah, I did actually miss a couple things on the HEAL grant. The application is open until December 20th for the businesses downtown who fall into the category of the HEAL, of the historic district. And then the decision will be announced as to who is rewarded those grants by January 10th. There's also a stipulation that construction has to be started by December, and I can't remember when in December that was. So yeah, kind of apply for the grant if you're interested, because you got to do it quick. Bower Building, again discussed, a lot of the conversation was around the new dais in the council quarters and sort of what that meant as far as opportunities for other buildings that are being used here. That's all I had. The next council meeting's on the 27th of December, or the next CDC meeting.
Which reminds me, the next budget finance committee meeting is Friday at some point. Missed it again.
And we have Christmas plans, right? We're spending Christmas Eve.
Yeah, Christmas Eve, we will not be having a meeting on Christmas.
Scott, let's start cooking turkey. Public safety suit.
Terry Baker attended our meeting and he brought to our attention a safety issue with houses that are lacking house numbers because emergency vehicles have problems finding those houses sometimes. So to address this, we discussed starting with just messaging to the community, that it was a safety issue when emergency vehicles can't find a house. So that's where we left that. And then we also discussed the fire chief becoming a mayoral appointment. Currently, it's a voting system, and I believe it's the only position of that authority that is not a mayoral appointment. I know the police chief is. So to the committee, it made sense to us for the fire chief to also be appointed by the mayor. We discussed the Gold Leaf Living Center, 400 Road, that Casey has already discussed. And we briefly touched on the truck route, developments there. 7th and Dearborn, a citizen brought to my attention that it's a one-way, and it's he's noticed some very close calls because a lot of people don't realize it's a one-way, myself included. I have to wonder.
Which street?
7th and Dearborn. So anyways,
Now you tell me.
so apparently we have all gone down it the wrong way. So Chief Patrick he's gonna have the police monitor that, and just kind of watch it and see if there's really any reason that it needs to be a one-way. If, they don't think that there's any reason that it needs to be, then we'll discuss at our next committee meeting making it a two-way.
That's in front of the apartments, right?
The Union, yeah, it runs into the Union.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
They thought maybe it was because when it was school,
Right.
they wanted
Yeah.
Right,
pickup
Yeah.
kids.
Did they take the sign still up there?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I know.
I have to turn myself in.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that. One of our citizen committee member admitted to it
He
as well.
admitted guilt.
I just can't remember.
I think
I don't go
Mike's
down
now
that way
taking
too
around
often.
with this video on his audio, so he
Turn there
could
and-
record
Yeah.
that admission.
So,
I definitely got pulled over there and called at Chip Baker for going the wrong way on that
Really?
way. Yes,
There you go.
because that's back when there actually was a school there.
Yeah.
Over there.
And then, lastly, the crossing guard that we talked about in the past, having a second crossing guard, that position has been posted. But I don't believe it's been filled yet, has it, Mara? That's it.
I might piggyback on Susan a little bit, about the, numbers on the houses. I have to give kudos to Russ because he looked up an ordinance that we have already that buildings have to have numbers posted on their building. So I want to thank him for that.
Susan will announce at a later time
Yeah, I
when the
don't
next
know,
meeting
it's
is.
on my calendar somewhere.
Take your time.
It is not on Christmas Eve.
Public Works and Utilities.
We did not meet because it was Veterans Day, and so our meeting is this Thursday, the 18th at 9 o'clock.
Legislator Bryant.
No report.
City Administrator, staff comments?
Yeah, a couple of things. First clarification.
Kept it all held in throughout this whole meeting till?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
just wanna make sure.
We're talking about the Bottle building. Hate to bring it up again, but I'm going to. RFP for what? Right now, we've been working with Jay Zimmershed. He's charged us very little to do all the renderings, cost estimates and all that. So we're talking about for a architect engineer, or if we're gonna use him to put out an RFP for the construction of the building, or exactly what are we doing there? I'm not sure what the motion was.
For an RFP, all of the above, so we can get an idea.
Okay, so we're gonna, okay, so you want an RFP for those engineering services? Okay,
Yeah, we gotta start there, because until we have that approved,
right.
that person's the one that,
Yeah, so we'll follow basically the same steps we did for like Sullivan Square, we went out for that, and then is that what everybody had in mind, or are we jumping to the next?
So do we need that? Is
Well,
that what you
that's,
getting at?
I didn't really hear that discussion, that's why I thought I'd clarify that before. I assumed that's what you
And
wanted.
then I don't know what the cost of that is, then you kind of, again, you're sinking cost in, it makes it hard to back out of.
well, no, because if he sends out that RFP, I mean, he does a portion of the work,
Right.
but it wouldn't be the full amount until the project's completed, because he has other work throughout the project.
Okay.
Right, Glenn, am I?
As far as, I'm not sure I understood that.
So if we have an architecture engineer RFP out, like we did Sullivan Square, and we accept that, let's say I think Sullivan Square was 60, somewhere around 60,000
I think, yeah,
for that portion of it.
Yeah.
We accept that. Then he sends out the bids for the plans.
correct.
Not all of that fee, and the council decides not to do the project. Not all that 60,000 is going to
Correct.
be used up because we didn't do the
Oh,
project.
correct, no. That's wherever stage in the process you got to, so.
So they have an itemized plan. 15,000 to get to this point, 15,000 to get to the next point. So will we know how that's broken down?
So the winning bidder, the low bidder, always comes in and presents, and at that time, that's
Yeah,
typically.
however you want to structure that.
We could ask.
Yeah, we want money up front, or just want it all in the end, or however you want to do that. It's always negotiated deal at that point, so.
So yeah, but yes, it could be.
All right, we'll go that direction. So, okay, that clarifies that. The other thing I just want to clarify, we are having another strategic planning session with Patty Kendrick there from KU. That is on December 4th, and if December 4th rings a bell, it should, because that is our Christmas parade. So I have nothing against doing both of those on the same day, but I don't know how you feel about that, because that'll be, she's proposing to do that in the morning, ending in the afternoon, then we have our activities and whatever. So I don't know if you're all aware of that, but December 4th is our Christmas parade and all that coming up. So if you want to go through, that's fine. If you don't, I think she's fairly flexible also, so.
So you want to move it back, probably can't move it up with Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we can't, you're right, we ran into that, that's why I think we hit on the 4th, but I don't think she realized that, we have our parade and all that going on that day, so.
So I'm out the 11th, weekend of the 11th.
Sure the 18th doesn't get easier for anybody.
I don't think so.
Well, there's no parade though, right?
There's no parade on that day. Until we know about.
We have parades all booked up. We can't do this.
Yeah, numerous parades.
Does that have to be Saturday?
So,
Yeah, I mean, how many hours does she need?
no, she was talking about all day really on Saturday, starting in the morning and taking a break, like pretty much what we did on the initial meeting.
I have 9 to 2 written down.
Something of that
5
nature.
hours, I mean.
Yeah. So,
So with all due respect to our esteemed council member who will not be joining us for next year, does it make sense to hold this with the new council?
well, that's also a good question, because we do have turnover on your council, so it might be an advantage.
Yeah, definitely would love to have your input.
Right, but
But I think, is it more effective to involve the council that's gonna be there for the next 2 years in that discussion?
I don't know, that's more than the other. We
Well, and you
can
talked
everyone be
about
present,
inviting Jerry.
current and.
Yeah.
I invited Jerry to the
Okay.
December
He's
4th
gonna be
one.
here, so
I asked
he's
him,
the only person.
I don't
Okay,
think
let's
everything
hold
is
that.
on the 4th.
Good.
but if Susan can't be there, I mean, we kind of want a full council at this. I mean, this is.
yeah, you
Yeah.
prefer to have everybody there, that's important.
It's either the 18th or next year.
Pretty much.
And I'm gone on the 18th, but that's no big deal.
It's up to you guys. I mean, 18th is the weekend before Christmas too, and a lot of people celebrate.
That's why I was like, I think
Yeah.
18th gets easy.
I'm okay early next year. Yeah. What about you?
I don't care.
Let's just see what she has open in January.
Okay, I'll do that. I've been going back and forth with around that, so, yeah, I didn't even realize, when you first threw it out, yeah, the 4th is kind of a big day for us. So anyway, that and, the folks from the state Main Street program will be visiting us, I think, the 13th and 14th of December, about a day and a half. They will be meeting with all the committees, all the board members, whatever. We're gonna have kind of a kickoff event and get our program rolling. We did put out a survey. Hope you all saw that. We've been pushing it pretty hard the past couple of weeks. It's just kind of a community survey. It's a real interesting thing to do if you haven't ever done one. And I think we have over 430 responses at this point. So that's a pretty good number. Pretty good number on that. So we're pretty pleased with that. So then we'll get a kind of a market analysis of what all that means at the end of the day. So they'll present it when they come here on the 13th. So anyway, so Main Street is going to be kicking off and moving forward here. So, and we're looking forward to that. So anyway, that's all I can think of right now.
Council comments? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moving to second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes, we're adjourned.